straight up time this with these 3 levels. Is Bomb Sector better?
Is it the type of update we want to read during stream? Is the follow-up question to that?
It is not. I'm sorry, Vex.
Uh-oh. We love you, Vex.
Okay, this is also not a level that I want to do all the guys for. Okay. So in that case, let's put a marker here.
We send lots of hugs.
Yes, we do. We're gonna go ahead and just do this beat 3 sectors goal. I just tested it, and I thought that you would maybe be using the speedrun levels for this, or like the speedrun route levels for this, but I think you just use the 3 main hub levels here. So starting off with Piston Sector. This bat is probably the most annoying thing in the level, honestly. Quickly explaining the movement of warptank, I guess for those that don't know, you always warp directly to where you're pointing. The warp is instant, but your shots are not instant. So you have to kind of warp after a little bit of a delay. You can pause and reset the game and continue through these cutscenes because it is slightly faster. But since we're just doing these 3 intro sectors, it doesn't really super matter. You can also use your warp to kill guys as long as you are next to them. The opening cycle for this is pretty lenient, but you might as well grab that checkpoint while you're here. Yep, other than that, just be careful you don't warp right there too fast. And then you can normally just skip that checkpoint because there's not really that much level after this. There's also not very many enemies in this level. And I just did a test run right before this, trying the normal like speedrun levels over to the right sector. But these opening ones are so much easier to clear out all the enemies for. So yeah, basically just use a combination of shooting and warping to be able to get through there. And that's a 2-minute easy. Okay. So, I guess slowing down that strat, because that one definitely felt better. We'll go through a little bit slower on what to do for Piston Sector. So you're going to want to do 2 quick warps to get up to here, and then kill this bat. You may need to land next to it and warp, but as you can see, even when you know what to do, that bat can kind of be in the way a lot. If you warp sideways here and warp through here, up and down, you can take this checkpoint, it doesn't super matter. As a heads up, you can kill these blue guys in some levels, but you need to drop a rock onto them, and there's no way to do that in this level. And then at the end, it's intended for you to go up there, but if you warp up here, shoot, and then shoot, this rock falls in here, which then allows you to warp up to here, and then shoot this down, but be careful about not warping too fast right here, because if you warp onto the rock as it's still falling into place, you'll die. And then just do all of that and quickly, and you should be fine there. Yard Sector is even easier. I use that warp right there just because it's fast. Just be careful with these turrets because they will fire a shot basically wherever they're aiming right there in front. But if you're quick with warps, you'll basically never be on the ground when they're possibly damaging you. If you miss that cycle, it's not really the end of the world, but you do sometimes need to rush in this game to make important cycles. And finally, everyone's favorite sector, cross sector. There's only a couple of guys to kill in this one. I generally prefer to do warp kills instead of using my gun for kills, except for bosses when you can kind of use UFO 50 mashing to get some pretty fast kills here. But warp kills are pretty much instant and are generally safer. Okay. So I think that's fine for that goal. That's $20. Okay. So obviously, if you get both the easy and the warp tank medium, you can just beat one more sector to be able to go up to healing sector here. But I'll do this goal from scratch as if you don't have that. Theoretically, all you need is 4 sectors of any kind beaten out of the opening 6 here. Or 7? 6, I think. But when you're doing the speedrun route, it's very slightly different, so I'll just kind of run through it really quick and show you what it looks like. I will be trying the fast junior sector on this one just to see if I can get it and run here. But I'm probably going to lose it. So there I had to delay my shot a little bit, because if I would have warped straight through there, I would have ended up dying. Once you see the icon load up in the bottom right corner, you can reset, and it basically just skips that cutscene. It is slightly faster even on the cutscenes with just one. And we'll try fast junior sector here. Knife of clothes, okay. We'll give it one more shot and then I'll show what it looks like normally in this level. Nice, okay. So that's the absolute fastest you can do it. I would not recommend doing that in a match until you're like very comfortable in warp tank. And even then it's obviously pretty hard to go for. Use those warps right there and then warp through here, and then you can just end the level that way. The opening cycle is very fast if you want it to be, but you can also slow it down kind of a lot. These lines that I'm taking through here are basically just meant to maximize the amount of time that you're warping and not just like scrolling along the ground here. Because when you're scrolling along the ground, it's a little bit slower than just instantly warping to wherever you need to go. I would also recommend spending some time just on the warp tank overworld practicing warping between levels, because you would be surprised at how intricate it can be. There is a fast cycle here to avoid that one wait. I personally prefer to just take that checkpoint a lot of the time. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Since I took that weird delay, I have no clue what the timing's going to look like. But I do a little bit of a stutter there before scrolling forward, because otherwise that sideways turret normally shoots me. And then on the 4 cutscene also reset. We're now going to navigate to healing sector. Shoutouts to the trans tank. Woo! Okay, so healing sector is a little bit of a time-consuming level. If you're on the ceiling here, you won't accidentally risk running into that worm. But I would mostly practice this beginning movement here. If you get the cycle correctly, you can just shoot that right there. Otherwise, just warp and kill those guys. And if you have a checkpoint available, I have a death warp, which makes this level much easier than I've never seen anyone do. If you death reset right there, and then get through this part fine, you can take this warp, this warp, this warp, this warp, and then if you need to, there's a coffee right there. I wanted to just show it off. Obviously, if you're getting the coffee, you need to beat the level from there. But this death warp right here, like, lines up so well that I feel like it has to be intentional. And I don't see very many people take that death warp very often. The run of healing sector itself has not gone super great here. The worm hitboxes also kind of extend for a little bit longer than you would expect them to. So you gotta be a little bit careful about that. Okay. But even with all of those deaths in healing sector specifically, that was still a sub 5-minute goal. So, as you can see, warp tank fast. That's the one thing I want to try to portray tonight. Is if you do get comfortable moving around in warp tank, even if you end up having a couple of deaths in levels, the levels themselves, until you get into some of the later sectors, are like so fast. And even having to navigate around the overworld and stuff, and even having a couple of deaths in healing sector, and also one or two like in some of the other sectors. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm eating before the next round of this. Yes, it has. You want me to get yours when I put mine down? Okay. Let's try this again to see what it looks like if I beat healing sector without dying. I'll just try to talk through all of that again just in case. Okay, so interesting thing with this goal that I don't think I mentioned last time either. Since you have to have your tank change, you actually have to reach healing sector on the overworld here. So you end up having to play at least 4 levels to be able to get access to it. I'm gonna try to just get there as fast as we can, and then based on how this run goes, we can kind of slow it down and break it down a little bit more after that. Fast Junior sector. We'll go one more try, and then we'll just do it normally. Nice. Okay. Okay. This got awkward. How did that get so awkward? Whatever. That's why you typically just kind of haul ass there, because if you end up having to wait, those cycles end up getting pretty weird. There's a fast cycle in this level, but I think Spoody says even him and Matt don't go for it here. So my guess would be that it's not super worth going for. I'm glad that happened at least once, because that is a death that you will start to have pretty often once you start speedrunning warptank, where your warp goes faster than your bullets do. So sometimes you end up warping onto a tile that doesn't exist anymore. It's one of my least favorite things about the game, but it's there, so. So at the 1 and 4 cutscenes, once you see them load up in the bottom bottom right corner, you can reset and reload and restart in the middle, change your tank color there, and then warp down here. This level is 3 checkpoints long. The first checkpoint is the scariest in my opinion. Stay on the ceiling here, and then warp right here, and then once the worm is next to you, warp up. And then just keep holding left here to get through all of this in the correct cycle. What happened there? I don't know. We're gonna use warp here. It didn't actually work, so it's fine. If you get stuck behind the worm there, it's clearly not that big of a deal. Take the checkpoint here and die. This is an intentional death warp that I'd like to set up. And basically if you get through this on the correct motion, warp right there to get a little bit farther ahead. You can warp right here, warp right here, warp right here, wait, shoot, warp right here. If you need a coffee, there's one right here. Warp. Warp. Be careful. Be careful. As I mentioned in the other segment, you can use the sparks that fly off of your warp to kill enemies and stuff, and that's what I was doing there to carefully clear stuff out. Okay. And even with, I believe, 1 death in Junior Sector, and a little bit of a time stuck in Healing Sector, with only the intentional death there, it's about a 4.5 to 5-ish minute medium. You also get a ton of levels out of it, which is helpful, because that was 5 levels right there, and you can pretty easily just tack on another couple. I think warptank is actually a pretty sneaky good game for 8 levels, which not a lot of cards have, honestly, which is another reason why I wanted to kind of preview it a bit here. But since we had a pretty good run there, let's put a marker there, and we'll just kind of slowly go through the strats for each of these levels. So I'll just back it up here. Actually, if we're not doing a timed run, let's just do this one nice and slow. So In order to access the right levels, you need to be able to beat one of these first 3 piston sectors selected because it's short and also the most out of the way for the other 2 levels in this. I kind of warped through all of that actually. Let's take this opening thing just in case people are watching this segment by segment. So we're going to want to warp here, roll onto the side of the wall, and then do a sideways warp through there. If you end up landing on the side of that moving platform, you'll die once it gets pushed off, so be careful. Here there's a couple of strats to be able to get through here quickly. You can either just warp straight onto here and shoot this over. That's a more beginner safe strat. If you're trying to get even faster, you just basically save a couple of shots and use the rock there. And then, like I pointed out in the other level, shoot this way, and then that goes down. Shoot that 3 times to break that, and then wait until that rock falls down to be able to warp down here. Then you can reset as soon as you see the cutscene load up. And this block is in place now. So, climb onto the ceiling here, and then warp down and up. It's a very slight optimization that you'll see a lot in warptank runs. If you want to do this fast cycle, you have to do all of this opening movement and rhythm. But I've now officially gotten it twice in a row, so you can see that it is consistent once you get it. It's just very tight, and honestly the opening move of it is pretty hard. If you warp onto that one brown spike, you get a free coffee, which is also helpful for another goal that we'll be working on in a sec. If you can't do that, let me show what it looks like if you just take your time here, because it does end up being a little bit different. So if you end up having to wait here, these guys are in a pretty tough position, but you can just kind of move around like this. There is a checkpoint here, so you can just kind of take your time through here, but you basically always want to do that warp here. And then if you end up having to wait here, it's not super long. So you can see that it doesn't save like a ton of time to do that ridiculously fast cycle, because even if you're just kind of going through the level casually, it's fine. Here you're pretty much going to always want to warp and kill that guy. Be careful not to run into these spikes. And then shoot this down, warp through that, and then you're good. I would also recommend spending some time just learning the movement between levels, because that's arguably just as important as the levels themselves. So here, move up till you're on this tile, and then warp sideways to be able to go through here. If you need to take a little bit more time, you can go over here. If you need a checkpoint, that's right here too. When you're on these blue tiles, you can't warp away, but you can still cause the sparks to kill guys. And then you can shoot that guy if you want to. If you keep holding right here, you always make it through there fine. So that part is scarier than it looks, unless you're trying to get the coffee, at which point it's kind of hard. Okay, there is a fast cycle here if you're like perfect, but I've literally never gotten it. So just follow this basic movement and try to catch this platform cycle if you can. Warp over to here, roll down, and then if you got through all of that fine, you'll need to stall here for a sec to make sure that that turret right there isn't in a position where it kills you. Because that turret has a bad habit of sniping you if you go like perfectly as quick as possible. And then once you see the icon in the corner, reset and continue. So now we can get to healing sector. Trans tank, woo woo. Warp, 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 warp. You can also just roll along the ceiling if you need to there, but those specific warps do save a little bit of time. Keep holding left through this. Wait for this fire. Warp onto the ceiling and hold right. Wait for this worm to be right there. Warp down. Warp up. And just keep holding up here, and you should be able to get through all of that part. You'll get more comfortable with when to time the warps the more that you play warptank, honestly. This death cycle I think is pretty important though, like unless you're playing this level in slim tank for some reason, which you shouldn't really ever be. Take this warp here, wait for this fire, warp, 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 warp. And then if you time that perfectly, and like I mentioned, if you need another coffee, whoops. If you need another coffee, you can get it there, but be careful because it is a little tight if you get the coffee timing. If you get there a little bit late, you can try to wait this out, but you can see here that this is kind of more people's general experience with this section, is just having to wait on these worms for forever. So yeah, you compare that to what it looks like if you just get the death cycle correctly here, and it's pretty night and day, honestly. Even if you miss that first warp, it's generally fine. You can also just warp up here. If you're not getting the coffee, you don't need to wait all the way down there. And then the actual movement through this part can sometimes feel a little clunky until you learn exactly where you're supposed to go. Oops. I remember this level, especially the second half. I would always just like end up having a couple of warps more than I needed to. But once you learn how many times you're supposed to shoot and stuff, it ends up feeling pretty nice. And then just warp onto the wall there, and warp up there, and you're good. Okay. Collect 4 coffees outside the starting room. Okay. So again, we're gonna try to just do it as fast as possible first, and then slow it down from there. So in order to get outside the starting room, you still have to do a level in the starting room, so we'll just do piston sector again. That's okay. I can show what this looks like if you end up having to take a death in this level. Because thankfully, that checkpoint is in a pretty good spot where you can just do the rest of the stuff pretty fast. Take the reset. Alright. So you can tell you get a coffee in a level when the orb sector turns brown instead of just red. So we'll grab the coffee in this one. As I've done with the other goals here. I'm going to try to get fast sector first just so you can see what it looks like. If you need to slow it down basically at any point during this, you can. But this just aims to try to beat the first cycle of the blue guy up ahead. I'm not holding up right there, that's what I'm doing wrong. We'll just do it normally. So you can end up seeing, it's not like that much of a time loss, especially if you end up dying a couple of times over it. But as you get through the end of this, you can see that there's one spike that is not like the others. Warp onto it, and then you get the coffee here. When you have a coffee and warp tank, you need to finish the level from that point without using a checkpoint. You can collect checkpoints before the point in the level where you hit the coffee trigger. I see a lot of people often like not take checkpoints at all if they're trying to get the coffees. But you can take them as long as you finish the level after collecting the coffee itself. So in meal sector, I guess also worth mentioning, to trigger a coffee in any level, you basically have to have the tank on the tile in the correct orientation. So here, I could take this extra safety checkpoint up here, right here. Warp onto this tile and you trigger the coffee here. Now if you get through the rest of this part a little slower, that thing can kind of be in the way. So just be careful that your eyeball shots and the ships aren't like super in the way there. And then as long as the little sector symbol turns that brown, you're good. Bomb sector has a little bit of a tricky coffee to get to. So just make sure that you kill all of these guys. And then we're going to warp onto the ceiling here, and then warp right to there. Exactly. And then, as I mentioned before, you do need to finish the level on the run that you got the coffee in the top left corner to actually collect it. So, for the fourth sector, you have a couple of options here. You can go tower sector, which is the closest sector to that, but personally, I don't like the tower sector coffee. So we'll show off mazurka sector, because this one is probably the fastest coffee. Be careful with that warp right there, because that warp right there like gets a lot of players, myself included. Because you can very easily just roll onto the thing here. But this coffee is super easy because it's another one of the just warp onto the brown spike coffees, and you picked it up already. So the hardest thing about this level from here is making sure that you kill these purple guys. Whenever you see these purple guys, they're normally surrounded or have one of these blocks next to them. If you shoot that block, it basically kills everything on the screen. Don't take this checkpoint, because if you take that checkpoint and then die, you can finish the level, but you won't have credit for the coffee. And then I see a lot of people get tripped up in this ending room here, but if you just warp straight down from this tile, and then over here, you win. So that's technically the fourth fastest. I'll show off some of the other coffees here, like just, I guess, depending on what route you're taking. I'm just going to kill those right there. Warp, 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 warp. Then come over here. You're going to need to clear out this segment, and then you're going to need to warp over there through here. Don't shoot this last block, because you need it to be able to warp onto the ceiling there. So, not the slowest coffee, but not my favorite one to have to get right away. There's also healing sector if you specifically have healing sector on the card already. This theoretically does synergize with the 4 coffees goal if you just happen to get the coffee and healing sector as one of your other ones. This is probably only worth it if you only, like, if you get the synergy for that. Because mazurka sector is almost certainly the fastest, just general, if it's on the card, go for it. I'll also show what it looks like here if you just kind of go. You can see that these worms are in a completely different cycle, and you end up having to wait on like almost all of them. It's not terrible, but it is a little annoying. And then this coffee's right here. And then you don't take that checkpoint, because otherwise you get locked out of the coffee. Oops. Okay. So if you need breakdowns on any of those other levels beforehand, outside of Mazurka Sector, I guess, I have them broken down in other segments of this video earlier on. I think the only one I haven't broken down yet is Mazurka, so I'll just run through that one really quick. This opening segment here, these arrows will instantly change your warp direction into whatever direction you warp into. Right here, be careful that you don't hold a direction, because it's really easy to roll onto these spikes and die. That was one of my most common deaths when I first started. And you can take this checkpoint when you're going to get this coffee. Just get under these guys and then try to shoot as fast as you can. And then you grab the coffee. These shots stay around for a lot longer than you think they would, so just be careful that you're not like standing still and expecting it to go away and it doesn't. Shoot this to get rid of that guy. Don't take that checkpoint. And then time your shot in here to where you can kill these guys. I see a lot of people kind of put themselves in weird positions here where they're not able to kill that guy. And then here, just be careful that you're not on a tile that gets lasered right there. And go to the left right here, and shoot right there. And you'll notice, as we've done all of these sectors just kind of casually, we are already up to 7 levels. The very hard is beat 9 levels and then talk to 3 different NPCs. I sometimes wish that it was just beat 9 levels, because then there would be like actual warptank synergy between the randomized tokenized stuff and the warptank very hard. And it's not like a ton of people currently play warptank anyway. But it's fine. Let me just quickly run through the very hard here really quick, and then we'll probably wrap it up for the night, because it seems like a good spot to end it on. Actually, let's run the ad first, because it's going to go in the middle of it. But while that's running, I can kind of just use this time to kind of yap and preview about it. Warptank has a total of 27 sectors, if I remember correctly. 24 of them have coffees, and 3 of them are basically just like survival levels where you have to kind of, stay alive in a level while enemies spawn in over time. One of the things that's kind of cool about Warptank is, depending on if you learn the gold route or the cherry route, you end up actually playing like completely different levels in it, where there's like a little bit of crossover between the two, but gold's like every single gold level that could be played for speed doesn't have a coffee in it, so you end up not being able to use those in the cherry run. But since this just asks you to beat 9 sectors, you actually are going to see one of those in this. For those that were in the league in previous seasons, this is Orb Sector. It's just the one where you end up warping into a big circle and have to stay alive for a while. Or not Orb Sector. Fuck, I forget. No, it is Orb Sector. So basically, we'll be doing the opening 4 levels that we've seen pretty much in every other goal. We'll do Yard and Crust Sector because those are pretty quick intro levels. We'll do Tower Sector because it's along the way. And then we'll do Orb and Stair over to the left, which we actually haven't seen in tonight's practice. That'll trigger the 9 cutscene, which we also haven't seen in tonight's practice. And then I'll show you the general route that we take from there to go to the NPCs, because that's also a pretty difficult part of this. And then I think what we'll do is, rather than like have an individual breakdown for all of these levels right now, yeah.
Oh my god.
So yeah, what we'll do is we'll just run through this and then the overworld movement to grab the NPCs. And whenever I do the part 2 of this, where we're going over the actual like individual levels, we can break down these levels a bit more. So, as we've done with a couple of other ones, Piston Sector is going to be the first level that we start with. We don't need coffees or anything, so just warp as fast as we can. I tried to get the extra fast cycle there, but it's pretty tight. One cutscene, reset, continue. Warp, 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 warp. We'll try for fast junior sector here again. If I don't get it within 2 tries, we'll just do normal. Ah, come on. Okay, I'll give it one more shot. Okay, we'll just do it normally. It's fine. It doesn't really save that much time to do the fast cycle, but it just feels a lot better. And obviously it doesn't save time if you die, so... Okay. Warp, 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 warp. He's just a helper boy. There's a specific stutter I do before moving forward there that helps a lot on that one. And then 4 cutscene reset. And before going up to take care of these levels, we'll do yard and crust sector really quick. Alright, give it up for cross sector. Depending on where that bat is, you sometimes need to be careful about warping down there or shooting down there. So this is the first time we've gotten to see tower sector just done super quickly tonight, because we don't have to get the coffee this time. That was risky. Okay, warp, 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 warp. We're going to do both of these sectors, and then the area over to the left is going to open up to us. If you buffer that shot, you can sometimes get ahead of this fire here, but I got the buffer shot, but then I messed up the part after. And as you can see, getting stuck there sucks, so shoot this twice to cover up that gap. And then depending on where the fire's at, sometimes you'll need to warp onto the top of those blue blocks. Be careful to not move too far there, and grab that checkpoint. Try to get through this part as fast as you can, because those 4 eyeballs, if you let them start firing, can be pretty annoying. And then orb sector is going to be our first survival level. If you keep holding left here, shoutouts to canvas, you don't have to really do anything for a while. You can shoot if you want to, clean stuff up, but at least until the guys start spawning in on the walls themselves, you can just go for little spinny spins up until that point. And then wait here, warp, warp. The slimes we haven't seen tonight, but they actually have a wider hitbox than it looks like they do. So you can actually hit them a tile on like both sides with shots or warps. So after this level we'll get a 9 cutscene, and then both of the... sometimes the level doesn't end there if you're like within range of warping onto the tile before it would disappear. So both of these 9 movements allow us to get the rest of the NPCs. The reason why we do these 2 levels last is because we're going to grab the NPC over here. We actually intentionally did not reset on that cutscene. So we could come up here, talk to this guy, and then reset. So we've beaten the 9 sectors and just need to talk to the 2 NPCs at this point. There's NPC number 2. This movement is very intricate, by the way, and I would definitely recommend practicing it. Oops. This one. Okay. So that's a sub 9-minute very hard, even with a couple of extra deaths in junior sector along the way. I think a lot of people instantly assume that warptank is going to take forever, and it definitely can if you start to have some spirals and stuff. But honestly, even if you theoretically, for instance, have the warptank very hard and 3 random levels or whatever, well, in that specific instance, you would still need to play through the 9 sectors of warptank to be able to get that cutscene to be able to access the NPCs. But if you had, like, collect 4 coffees, for instance, you could play everything for the collect 4 coffees and then come back for the rest of these sectors. Warptank obviously doesn't need to be beaten all in one sitting, which is nice, but even if you do bang it out, even with a couple of deaths, the very hard is a pretty consistent sub 10, I would say. And then once you have the 9 cutscene, you have access to a bunch of other levels here as well. These levels, I guess, just touching on this now, since this will probably be the end of this first session. All of these levels over here are theoretically worth playing, but would only really be worth it in a situation where you're trying to just blast out Puzzler. So, like, if you theoretically wanted to do a Puzzler with all 15 levels in Warptank, you could, and most of these would be pretty fast. Be careful if you warp onto this tile right here, because then you can't get back over to this area. Warptank has a lot of very intricate overworld movement, and if you learned anything from tonight's practice, I guess just be careful that you don't get stuck in the overworld, because I see a lot of people, especially on the way to healing sector. I would say healing sector is probably the biggest offender of people getting lost on the overworld. But I would just spend some time warping around on the overworld, learning where you go, learning what you can combo that into if you just immediately warp off of that, and kind of just trying to chain some stuff together. Because once you start moving around in Warptank, like, very quickly, it's a very fun game. Okay. So that was about an hour or so of running through all of those goals. I'll take that. That was pretty good. We'll go ahead and call it there for the night, because it's starting to get late and I don't want to go too late. Have a good night, everyone. We will be back probably at some point tomorrow with something. I don't really know yet. I have to run to the store in the morning to restock us on food, because I didn't go last week and definitely feeling it now. But I should be pretty